This story is a precursor to the conversation we're having today. Doubtless, a lot of you have had questions about this program, the vaccination program nationwide. You heard it from some of the people that we spoke to. Why now? Something that they have never seen since independence. Well, tonight we are joined by a scientist who knows the subject very well. He has made it his life's work. He teaches this in school, among other things, and he actually has had a hand in developing some serious vaccines that have been used across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in introducing to you Dr. or Professor Heshbon Tindi. Karibu sana.
Asante.
Professor is from the Machakos University, but he has a PhD in molecular immunology, a master's in molecular biology on drug prophylaxis and animal health. All that English means he knows what he's talking about. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, Victor.
Thank you very much. Now, I think we'll just go straight in. There's quite a few questions here about this subject matter. Thank you for joining us once again. And could you briefly explain why livestock vaccination is crucial, particularly in Kenya, just foundational?
Yeah, thank you, Victor. First of all, we have to understand that we are dealing with a developing country where we need food security. So the very first thing, even before you talk about anything, we need to secure our future. We need to secure our livestock. Mm-hmm. And that is a cornerstone of this country, mm-hmm. in the dairy sector and also in the private sector, in the pastoral sector. Mm-hmm. If we lose that, we lose our future. A gentleman has just talked about paying dowry in form of livestock.
Right.
Imagine, without livestock, you can't marry. Mm-hmm. We need to secure that. So there is immense advantage in securing the future by protecting the livestock. And I think that's why, for us as scientists, I think it is an exciting moment to be in Kenya and to be talking about vaccines, to be able to protect our future.
All right.
Yeah.
Now that we've established that, tell us a little bit about this campaign that the president announced a few months ago. So the general understanding is that the campaign targets several livestock diseases. Which diseases are being prioritized and why are they significant?
I think for me, having worked in the livestock sector, I would first of all talk about the East Coast fever, which actually is like the cancer of the cattle.
Oh, wow.
So when we are talking about cancer in human beings, this is the cancer that we need to talk. If animals are infected by the ticks, which then transmit the parasite that causes East Coast fever, then they die within 21 days. If they don't die, then there is muscle wasting. So if there are animals that we need to take to the butcher, the farmer loses the weight.
They waste away.
They waste away. So basically, you are losing the mass, and the kgs is basically we are losing the few shillings. Mm-hmm. If it is in the dairy sector, then that cattle is going to cut the production in milk. Mm-hmm. Imagine of our young children who depend on milk. Mm-hmm. For the protein at that tender age. It means that our nutrition is also affected, apart from the fact that the farmer also is losing in the liters of milk. Mm-hmm. So I put that as an important disease that actually we need to slow down or totally eradicate. Now, when we come to the small ruminants, we have PPR.
So, just for the sake of our viewers, small ruminants, we're talking about.
We are talking about goats and sheep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and for this country, when we are fond of nyama choma, so instead of actually going for especially for the small gathering, instead of going for a whole cattle, we majorly go for the goats,
boozy
and all that. Mm-hmm. So that actually put PPR, which is Peste des Petits Ruminants, a small, pest for the small ruminants. Mm-hmm. That puts that disease as an important disease that we need to slow. Mm-hmm. And again, I get to the trade that we do for in goats and sheep. So if those animals, we lose them, then we lose the trade,
Mm-hmm.
we lose the money, we lose the tax.
Right.
And therefore, we needed to rethink and see how best to help the economy of this country.
Talk to us a little bit about foot and mouth.
So foot and mouth is another one. First of all, it's actually transboundary. It means that if we don't actually protect our animals in Kenya, it can also jump into the neighboring countries, but it can also go to Somalia.
Mm.
So, and therefore there is trade actually involved in terms of the foot and mouth disease.
All right.
So that actually puts an important aspect in terms of controlling that disease, not only for the health within the country, but also for the whole region.
Well,
yeah.
We have, you have explained quite well when it comes to the economic impact. Could you tell us a little bit more on the health impact of these diseases now on humans?
Yeah. First of all, for East Coast fever, the health impact is on the fact that majorly in the dairy industry, we rely on milk. And of course, if the disease comes, then there is shortage of milk. And that actually affects, especially in our babies and all that. But of course, it doesn't jump into the human because it doesn't jump on the human. And the same with the PPR, which is the pest for the small ruminants. Yeah.
All right, that's good to know because I know some people were worried that this and this would happen. But now another concern that has come up in the recent weeks is around the safety of the vaccines. As a person who's actually developed multiple vaccines and administered them fairly successfully, many people are concerned about this safety. Could you explain, for our viewers, the process of testing and approval of these vaccines before they are actually released?
Yeah, thanks, Victor. I think, and that is part of especially for the last, let me say, the last 7 years of my life before I joined into I became the Don into the university. I was working with an organization called Global Alliance on Livestock Veterinary Medicines. One of my key activity was to walk around the vaccine production institute, including Kevevapi was one of them. And one of my role was to make sure that Kevevapi meets what is called the good manufacturing practices, especially in the veterinary field. Kevevapi is one, but also we had a Center for Tick and Tick-borne Diseases based in Malawi, which actually went into production of the East Coast fever. And around other eight vaccine production institutes across Africa, up to Mali, Senegal, and also PanVac in Addis. And for you to be satisfied with the ISO standard, you needed to show that you are having good manufacturing practices, and that includes the quality of the vaccine. So we walk through the production process from right away from structuring the production facility to the materials that goes into the production of the vaccines, to the staffing, up to when we have the final product. And once we have the final product, we test it within the institute. We send it to facilities such as PanVac to certify that, and also to other reference laboratory. For East Coast fever, we've even sent them up to a lab in Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp, which is actually a reference laboratory for WHO. And therefore, they are certified by that WHO to certify that the quality has gone into the production. And for vaccine production, we say that we build the quality into the production process. And therefore, for me as a scientist sitting here, I think I'm convinced that, especially for East Coast fever, for PPR, we've walked Kevevapi through a quality vaccine production manual.
And you're satisfied?
And I'm satisfied.
All right. Have these vaccines, and I know from your experience you have examples, have these vaccines been used successfully in Kenya and also other countries around the continent?
I think quite a good, interesting question. First of all, I want to say is that I personally have vaccinated animals in Tanzania. I vaccinated animals in Malawi. I vaccinated animals in Mozambique. I vaccinated animals in Rwanda, Uganda, personally.
And we're not talking about 2 or 3 cows here.
No. For East Coast fever, we are talking about 2.5 million cattle that has been vaccinated across 11 African countries. Mm-hmm. For PPR, we have actually vaccinated, and at the moment, Uganda has vaccinated cattle in the Karamoja region. This country has actually vaccinated cattle, in Narok, PPR, on trial basis, and we have seen up to now, the adverse reactions that is normal to any other disease, to any other vaccine, and which is acceptable within the range of any trials, actually. Those have been well documented. Farmers can attest all the way from Amboseli, from Narok, from Wazingishu can attest that we are vaccinated for East Coast fever. Their livestock are there, and we can even go and look at the tags, because when we do vaccinate with East Coast fever vaccine, infection and treatment method, we do the tagging. And therefore, any animal that is still alive that has not been taken to the butcher, actually we can actually satisfy that that animal is live.
And it's doing well.
It's doing well.
All right. Now, still under the subject of, there's been quite a lot of mistrust and some innuendos and propagandas and concerns. Some people fear that there are hidden motives behind this campaign. How would you respond to these suspicions?
I think, first of all, we can walk through the history of the vaccine, especially the major one that the government has talked about. PPR, I've had PPR, I've heard about East Coast fever, I've also heard about FMD. East Coast fever is a vaccine, initially, the initial stages of development was done at our own Calro, when it was formerly called CARI. Then technology transferred to International Livestock Research Institute, then personally, I transferred the technology to Center for Tick and Tick-Borne Diseases, but also Calro is now producing it. And we have scientists there who can attest if anything is added into the vaccine, then we can tell. Calro can test. University of Nairobi actually can test. At our veterinary, the campus on veterinary sciences can do.
Kabete.
Yes, personally at the Machakos University, I have a facility that can test if anything is added on it. And therefore, as a public institution and a public servant, I think those are things that we can safeguard. Coming on PPR, the production process is pretty simple. We put the virus into a mammalian cell called the verocells so that we can multiply it. We grow it 5 days, and then we harvest the attenuated virus. And then we titrate that. If you add anything, any other molecular scientist can actually attest that, can actually do quality control on that and say something else is added into this. And they are established procedures to do that.
All right.
You can pick in the field
any at random,
test it.
So it would be fairly easy for an expert such as yourself
yes.
to identify if something else has been added.
Yes, and this country has so many labs actually. Most universities can do this. We have research institutions that can do this. We have our own vaccine, the national quality laboratory that can actually test this. So there are many agencies that can actually do that to safeguard the assets that we have in this country. Yeah.
The other concern also would be coming from any role, if any, of international organizations and donors. What role do they play in this campaign, and how does one ensure transparency?
First of all, and that's why history is important, because history helps us to build the culture in any society. If this, especially East Coast fever, was first of all done at Calro, now CARI, and they're still doing this. They still have the facilities, and we can actually see all their donors. When I was working at the International Livestock Research Institute at that time, we were funded by the OSAID and CSIR RO, which is the research wing of the Australian government, and partly the Kenyan government. Therefore, at that time, we can't say that their interest is still there up to date.
Mm-hmm.
Now, today, if another donor wants to help in the deployment of the vaccine in the field, I think that is a pretty good. They're basically taking in a product that was produced with a different donor and seeing it's working, why not support it? If our Kenyan government want to now cascade this into for its own citizens, I think that's something that in this time, as a scientist, for me, I'm happy that at least we have a government that is actually identifying the need and the sweat that the scientists have gone through, and probably also safeguarding activities that our young scientists can actually join the job market and research on.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, so we've looked at that. There's another side to this. Are there any side effects and risks? I think you touched on that a little bit, but could you just elaborate a little bit? Any documented side effects of these vaccines, and how are they being managed? And is there a legitimate concern that these risks can affect a huge amount of animals across the country?
For ECF, which have actually been associated with for over 12 years, I think there is a well-documented manual, vaccination manual on the vaccine, up to the adverse reaction. And adverse reaction for ECF is basically less than 1%. And that is not unique only to East Coast fever or PPR or even FMD. Because even when we look with the recent pandemic, we had adverse reactions that were actually very minimal. And those are within the acceptable range. And I will ask in a simple question that sometimes, even when we eat ugali, you can eat ugali and then you get a blot. You see, if you overeat, then you find that not everybody will get a blot, but a few, depending on the body reactions. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I will say that any adverse reaction, especially for East Coast fever, is well documented. Personally, I have data that has even been published. Mm-hmm. They are all over in the internet in this era, and we can direct anybody to that.
So nothing to worry about?
As a scientist, nothing to worry about. All
right, all right. Now, let's take it a little faster. Do you have any idea of how the rollout of this vaccine is going to be, or how would you advise that the vaccine program, the vaccination program, is rolled out across the country for maximum effect, for it to be successful?
I think government always have a manual of rolling out their program through the line ministries. Mm-hmm. And within the line ministries, there are technocrats, well trained. In fact, I still think that, because I've worked with government across Africa. Right. And I've worked with our experts at the Directorate of Veterinary Sciences. Those vet doctors have confidence in them. I've actually trained many veterinarians in this country. And there are also NGOs in this business. So, and also there are also other stakeholders. There are farmers. We've also trained vaccinated across the country, And therefore, what for me I would say as a point of discussion is that let's bring in the stakeholders together. Those who are still skeptic, let's give them the information, proven information that they can actually verify, so that they can understand how the vaccine works, its importance, and the advantages that it can give to the country.
All right. You have worked internationally. You have had vast experience in this field. From your experience, what lessons from other countries can we adopt to make this program and others like it a success? As briefly, please.
I think discussions. And this is cultural, because our African software was based on oral, with oral literature. Mm-hmm. We were based on telling stories. So let's tell them the real stories. Let's tell people the story about the vaccine, what it is, how it works, the advantages, and also the disadvantages. In fact, I will refer to one of the slogans that we developed for East Coast fever. one shot for life. One shot and you protect your livestock, your cattle for life. You lose your cattle, you lose your income. So for me, I will say is that, that our culture was based on informing the others so that they understand. And we will get around fire those old days and do stories. And that would build the knowledge of the other person. And once he understands, when an African understands something, he buys it. And for me, I have seen that. I've seen that in Kenya. When they understand the advantage of the vaccine, they do vaccinate. There are farmers who have actually vaccinated, including big farmers, big ranches, and also small-scale farmers. And I have no doubt that that they will reject the program.
All right, all right. Now, as we wind up, I want to give you an opportunity. What message would you like to share with farmers and the general public who are hesitant to vaccinate their livestock? There's your camera. Talk to the people. What message would you have?
I think for me as a Kenyan, I can say 25 years ago, I was an aspiring scientist. I was an aspiring young man going to the university. I didn't know what the future held for me. Through that, government invested a lot of money in terms of scholarships and the university and the infrastructure at the university to make sure that they produce one person called Dr. Tindi. Imagine if I came out and there were no vaccine to research. My future would have gone down. Let us not kill the dream of our children. We have children who want to become scientists like myself. That person needs something to research. That person needs to develop a solution into the future. We have many of them, the young scientists, who are not having jobs. Let's continue producing those jobs. Today we have Kevevapi. I'm looking into the future when we can have 10 Kevevapi so that we can employ 10 young graduates. Those farmers, they are the ones who will make us do this. If we safeguard their livestock, if they get their money, if that money comes back into the economy, the government is going to build for us the infrastructure we need. And the jobs, the future jobs for our children.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Heshbon Tindi of the Machakos University and one of our senior and eminent researchers and scientists in the area of animal vaccines. Thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your insights on Insight Tonight. Asante sana.
Thank you, Victor.
All right.